The story kicks off in 1988 at a fun event in Las Vegas. There's this guy named Hank Rogers, all excited to introduce folks to his new game called Go. But sadly, nobody seems interested in checking out his booth. Even the money Hank spent to advertise his game goes to waste because people are too busy playing Tetris at another stall. Now, Tetris is this cool puzzle game where you fit different shaped blocks together as they fall down. The name Tetris comes from the Greek word tetra, meaning four, which refers to the four blocks in each shape, and tennis, because the game's creator liked tennis. Curious about all the hype, Hank decides to give Tetris a try, and boy, does he get hooked. Later on, he talks to his friend Eddie, who works at a bank, and asks to borrow some money to buy the rights to Tetris. Eddie's a bit hesitant because of Hank's previous game, Go, didn't do so well, but Hank's convinced that Tetris could be a massive hit, especially in Japan, where it can be played on computers, game consoles, and arcade machines. Hank explains how Tetris is super addictive and keeps players coming back for more. He believes it's the perfect game that could change the gaming world. 4 years ago, back in 1984, a guy named Alexei Pajitnov, who worked with computers in a place called a computer science center, had this cool idea. He thought, hey, why not make a fun game on my old school computer? So he started tinkering around and came up with this game called Tetris. At first, it was super simple, just these blocks falling down, kind of like two brackets stuck together to make a square. Alexei and his pals worked on it, adding shapes and colors to make it more interesting. They didn't do it to make money, they just wanted to have a good time. So they shared it with people for free. And guess what? People loved it, especially in the Soviet Union where Alexei lived. But here's the thing. Back then, the Soviet Union wasn't really into the whole business of games. Then along comes this guy from England named Robert Stein. He was on the lookout for cheap games he could sell. When he saw Tetris, he was blown away. He wanted to buy it from Alexei, but there were rules in the Soviet Union about how deals like that worked. So Robert had to go through this government-owned organization called Elorg to buy the rights, and he only had to pay $10,000 for it. After that, Robert joined forces with some influential people like Robert Maxwell and his son Kevin Maxwell to spread Tetris far and wide. They approached Nintendo, where CEO Hiroshi tried the game and loved it. He offered a lot of money to buy it, but Robert, also known as Hank, had bigger plans. He wanted to release Tetris through his own company, Bulletproof Software, with Nintendo's support. To make this happen, he needed a loan from Eddie's bank, which came with high interest and the risk of losing his house. Back in Tokyo, Hank shared his ambitious plan with his wife Akemi, who was initially hesitant due to the high stakes. However, Hank's determination eventually convinced her. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Alexei received a surprise visit from someone claiming to be Valentin Trifonov from the KGB. Trifonov informed Alexei of the KGB's intent to block Tetris, fearing it was distracting workers from their duties. Kevin reached out to Hank about the Tetris license in Japan. He explained that Sega now had rights for arcade games, leaving Hank's company with just PC and console game licenses. Hank, feeling concerned, sought advice from Hiroshi and decided to visit Nintendo's American branch in Seattle.
Papa's gotta go and get ready for his business trip. But I can't wait to see your show. Okay?
There, he met Minoru Arakawa and Howard Lincoln. Hank proposed Tetris for Nintendo's upcoming handheld console, Game Boy, highlighting its potential, like Mario Brother. Simultaneously, Kevin, now at Atari, pursued the Tetris license for handheld consoles. This led Hank to journey to the Soviet Union to negotiate directly with the game developers, as the Cold War tensions still loomed over relations between the US and the Soviet Union. Upon arrival, a translator named Sasha greeted Hank, and they quickly sought a meeting with Nikolai Belikov, head of the Elorg organization holding the Tetris game license. Upon explaining his purpose, Hank was surprised to learn that Elorg had never licensed Tetris. He detailed the convoluted path of license purchases from Stein to Elorg, then to Mirrorsoft, and eventually to himself for the Japan region. Despite initial skepticism from Nikolai, Hank's determination convinced him to reconsider. Nikolai granted Hank another meeting the following day. True to his word, Hank returned the next morning, where he encountered not only Nikolai and Alexei, the game's creator, but also Valentin and his associate. However, Stein and Kevin also arrived, seeking to negotiate the license. It became evident that Tetris was only licensed for PC, excluding other devices. Disappointed, Hank was asked to return yet again the next day.
I'm thinking. You go home today, see this production of Tetris, all will be forgiven.
Upon leaving the meeting, Hank serendipitously encountered Alexei, hitching a ride with him. This unplanned encounter led to a successful connection, as Alexei invited Hank to dinner at his home that evening. Meanwhile, Valentin contacted Robert, offering assistance in securing the Tetris license. Robert agreed to provide financial support, on the condition that Kevin remained unaware. That night, Hank went to Alexei's house. He brought a picture of his wife and their 4 kids. They sat down to eat dinner together and talked a lot. Hank and Alexei had a great time chatting because they both knew about programming and making games. Alexei even showed Hank the very first Tetris game he made on his old computer. They got an idea to improve the game so it could clear more than one line at a time. Later, when Hank was going back to his hotel, something unexpected happened. The KGB, a powerful organization in the Soviet Union, stopped him. They scared him and told him to leave the country right away. Hank had to leave everything behind and rush out of the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Akemi, Hank's wife, received a warning from Soviet embassy representatives. They told her that if Hank didn't come back to Japan, they could face serious problems. It was a very scary situation for Akemi. Back at the hotel, Hank found his room in a mess. The KGB had searched for it. Then Sasha, a friend, came and told him that even his apartment had been searched. The KGB saw Hank as a threat because he wanted to make a game. They were afraid that if foreigners got hold of Soviet property, it would weaken the Soviet Union's power. Sasha warned Hank to stay safe and kissed him, but Hank felt uncomfortable because he was married. He asked Sasha to leave immediately. It was a difficult and dangerous time for Hank, facing threats and uncertainty in a foreign land. The next morning, Hank phoned his family and Maya, his daughter, came to get him. Maya invited her father to her upcoming concert. Hank then instructed Akemi, his colleague, to contact their lawyer. They needed to send a contract for the game Tetris to Elorg through a fax machine. Additionally, Hank asked Akemi to draft a new contract for licensing Tetris on handheld gaming devices. Later that morning, Hank, along with Stein and Kevin, headed to Elorg to discuss the Tetris license further. Stein quickly signed a contract for Tetris arcade rights, but it didn't cover handheld devices or video game consoles. Hank met with Nikolai, who needed reassurance that Hank was legitimate. Hank showed Nikolai the Tetris license he acquired for Japan from Mirrorsoft, proving his authenticity. Before Nikolai could meet with Kevin, Valentin intercepted him. Valentin conveyed the Soviet Union government's wish for exclusive sales to Mirrorsoft. Nikolai reluctantly agreed and sold the handheld rights globally to Mirrorsoft for $1 million. However, Nikolai secretly desired to sell the handheld and console rights to Hank. He gave Hank a week to make a counteroffer to Nintendo, as he trusted Hank more than Kevin. As they left Elorg, Alexei, Hank's companion, revealed that Hank had been under surveillance since arriving in the Soviet Union. Shockingly, Sasha, their interpreter, was a member of the KGB. Unfortunately, Nikolai, who wanted to sell the Tetris license to Hank, got caught by the KGB. They tortured Nikolai to stop him from carrying out his plan. Later, Hank returned to Tokyo, only to receive a fax from Nikolai informing him that the Tetris game had been halted. Along with the message was a photo showing Hank kissing Sasha, taken without their knowledge and used to blackmail him. This scheme was orchestrated by Valentin, who pressured Nikolai to sabotage Hank's purchase of the Tetris license. Things got worse for Hank when Nintendo officials informed him that they couldn't secure the Tetris license because Robert and Kevin from another company had persuaded Nintendo to collaborate with them. This news left Hank shocked and frustrated. To add to his troubles, Akemi and Maya returned home from a concert Hank missed. Hank found himself facing a cascade of problems. The rights to the game for consoles and handheld devices were lost, and there was a risk of a lawsuit from Nintendo due to suspicions of involvement in a multi-million-dollar business scam. He feared losing his home as collateral and struggled to restore order in his household. Meanwhile, Nikolai, having endured torture by the KGB, sought refuge at Alexei's house. He revealed to Alexei plans to sell Tetris to Mirrorsoft, with his own removal from the deal once it was finalized. The following day, Alexei made a plan. He stayed late at work, purposely working on things to keep others occupied. Then, when no one was looking, he started a fire in a trash can to cause a commotion. While everyone was busy dealing with the fire, Alexei quickly sent a fax to Hank. Meanwhile, Kevin had a big idea. He went to his dad, Robert, and asked for $1 million to buy the rights to Tetris for handheld devices. But Robert surprised Kevin by revealing a secret. He had already paid a hefty sum to Valentin, ensuring they had a foot in the door. Robert even claimed to have connections to Mikhail Gorbachev himself. At the same time, Hank paid a visit to Nintendo's office to meet with Howard and Minoru. He showed them Alexei's fax, revealing that Mirrorsoft didn't have exclusive Tetris rights. This meant there was still a chance for them to swoop in. Hank urged them to come to Moscow with a contract to seal the deal. When Hank, Howard, and Minoru arrived in Moscow, they quickly met Nikolai, who was accompanied by Sasha. They proposed a deal with an initial payment of $5 million. Nintendo would handle marketing and production costs, with $1 per unit sold going to Elorg. Nikolai agreed, but Sasha objected, citing Tetris as government property. This halted the deal, as Valentin continued pressuring Robert for $1 million within 24 hours to secure the Tetris license. At Mirrorsoft's office, Stein arrived and confronted Kevin, suspecting a deal made behind his back. Stein believed the new agreement wouldn't benefit him. Misunderstandings escalated into a physical altercation between Stein and Kevin. Soon, Robert and Kevin flew to the Soviet Union to meet Gorbachev. Robert expressed his interest, but Gorbachev viewed them as outsiders, accusing Robert of greed. Simultaneously, Robert, Kevin, Hank, Howard, and Minoru approached Nikolai with a revised offer. Hank and Nintendo's proposal promised benefits for Elorg and the Soviet Union. After some investigation, Mirrorsoft was discovered to be nearly bankrupt and couldn't offer more than what Nintendo and Hank proposed. Despite Robert's persistence, Nikolai surprised everyone by turning down his offer and quickly signing with Hank and Nintendo. Valentin, Nikolai's loyal friend, and Sasha confronted Robert at Elorg, exposing his company's financial troubles and broken promises. Kevin felt betrayed by his father's unilateral decisions and secretly bribed Valentin. Despite still being willing to assist, Valentin demanded 50% ownership of Tetris instead of additional money. Pursued by KGB agents, Valentin chased after Hank and his companions, aided by Alexei. Sasha alerted Mikhail Gorbachev to Valentin's plan to exploit Tetris. Soon Valentin and the other agents rushed to the airport. They checked all the planes bound for Tokyo, hoping to catch Hank, but Hank had outsmarted them, taking a different flight. As Valentin attempted to chase the plane, Sasha and her team appeared. They arrested Valentin and his colleagues on orders from Mikhail Gorbachev, accusing them of corruption and abuse of power. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Hank surprised his family. He set up a mini stage in the living room for Maya's solo concert, making up for missing her previous performance. He also delighted Akemi with a $5 million deal for bulletproof software from Nintendo. In 1989, the Game Boy, featuring the addictive Tetris, became a sensation, selling over $110 million worth. Hank sent Alexei a Game Boy and tickets to San Francisco, fulfilling his promise. Together, they founded the Tetris Company. Stein secured the Tetris license for consoles, while Robert Maxwell's financial misdeeds led to bankruptcy. His son, Kevin, faced legal trouble. In 2014, Hank appointed Maya as Tetris's CEO. With over 500 million copies sold, Tetris remains a gaming icon. Subscribe to our channel for more updates and stories like these.